Let me start with a number that sounds completely insane at first. $87 trillion. That's the real strategic value of Greenland. And no, I'm not talking about the $4 or $5 trillion in minerals that pop up in every lazy headline. That's pocket change in geopolitical terms. I'm talking about the real value, when you stack military positioning, control of future shipping lanes, rare earth independence, and long-term containment of China into one equation. Here's the uncomfortable truth. This has nothing to do with Trump's personality. Nothing to do with buying land. Nothing to do with expanding a map. This is about preventing American technological and military power from collapsing within the next 20 years. And the path to that collapse runs straight through a frozen island most people couldn't point to on a map. Right now, literally as you're watching this, China controls roughly 80 to 90% of the world's rare earth processing. Not oil. Not gas. Rare earths. The stuff that goes into everything modern power depends on. Every advanced fighter jet. Every precision missile. Every satellite. Every smartphone. Every electric vehicle. Every wind turbine. No rare earths means no modern economy. No modern military. No technological dominance. And that's the nightmare scenario Pentagon planners have been quietly warning about for over a decade. Because here's the part that should make you uneasy. America, the most powerful military in history, is currently dependent on Chinese supply chains for the materials that power its weapons systems. That's not competition. That's vulnerability. And Greenland sits right in the middle of the solution. Not someday. Not hypothetically. Right now. This video series is about explaining why Greenland is no longer optional. Why it's not a debate. Why it's not interesting speculation. And why, whether people like it or not, American control of Greenland is a strategic inevitability. Not because someone wants it. Because the math leaves no alternative. Welcome to the strategic calculus most governments won't say out loud. And before we go deeper, quick reminder, if you like content that actually breaks down what's happening behind the scenes, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop your prediction in the comments. I want to see who's tracking this early. Let's start with the foundation of everything. The rare earth crisis. Let's slow this down for a second, because this is where most people completely underestimate the problem. Rare earth elements aren't rare because they don't exist. They're rare because they're difficult, dirty, and expensive to process. There are 17 of them. Names most people never hear unless they work in defense or high-tech manufacturing. Neodymium. Dysprosium. Terbium. Praseodymium. They sound like sci-fi materials, but they're the backbone of modern power. Here's what that actually means in real terms. One F-35 fighter jet requires over 900 pounds of rare earth materials. A Virginia-class submarine? Over 9,000 pounds. Every radar system, guidance chip, laser targeting unit, satellite array, all of it depends on rare earth magnets and components. Now here's the part that should make you pause. China doesn't control rare earths because they have all the deposits. They control them because in the 1990s, they made a long-term strategic decision while the West walked away. Mining rare earths is environmentally messy. Western governments decided it wasn't worth the political cost. China decided it was worth everything. Fast forward to today. China produces about 70% of global rare earth supply and controls nearly all processing capacity. Processing is the key. Without it, raw ore is useless. And China has already proven they're willing to weaponize this. In 2010, they restricted exports to Japan during a dispute. Japanese industry almost collapsed overnight. In 2019, they openly threatened the United States during trade negotiations. The message was clear. No rare earths. No advanced weapons. No military dominance. This is why every Pentagon report keeps circling the same terrifying conclusion. America cannot compete with a peer adversary while depending on that adversary for critical materials. Now enter Greenland. Greenland holds the second largest rare earth deposits on Earth. Projects like Kvanefjeld alone could supply American defense and tech industries for decades. So why isn't it developed? Because Danish regulations, environmental bans, and local political resistance have frozen it in place. From a humanitarian perspective, those concerns are valid. From a superpower survival perspective, they're irrelevant. Because when national security is at stake, environmental debates don't decide outcomes. Strategic necessity does. And from Washington's perspective, Greenland solves the rare earth problem in one move. That alone makes it existential. But this is only the first layer. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention. The Arctic is opening. Fast. Not in 100 years. Not in 50 years. In the next decade. Shipping routes that were frozen for thousands of years are becoming commercially viable. The Northern Sea Route already cuts 40% off travel time between Asia and Europe. That's not a small efficiency gain. That's a global trade revolution. Every day a container ship spends at sea costs roughly $15,000 in fuel alone. Cut 7 days off a voyage and you're saving over $100,000 per trip. Multiply that across thousands of ships, every year. We're talking trillions of dollars in trade realignment. But here's the catch. The Northern Sea Route runs along Russian-controlled waters. Russia can close it. Tax it. Weaponize it. China understands this. That's why they've declared themselves a near-Arctic state. That's why they're building icebreakers, funding Arctic research, and partnering with Russia on infrastructure. Now here's where Greenland becomes the choke point. Any ship using these routes must pass through the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, the same strategic corridor NATO guarded during the Cold War. Whoever controls Greenland controls one side of that gate. And whoever controls that gate controls Arctic commerce. Denmark cannot enforce this. They don't have the navy, the capital, or the strategic doctrine. America does. This isn't theory. Denmark already monetizes maritime choke points closer to home. They understand the concept. But Greenland in 2050 will be as strategically valuable as the Strait of Hormuz is today. And Washington knows it. Let's get brutally practical. Look at a map. Greenland sits directly between North America and Eurasia. Any Russian missile targeting the US crosses Greenland. Any Chinese trajectory toward North America passes nearby. This isn't politics. It's geometry. Right now, America operates critical early warning systems from northern Greenland. Those radars provide 15 to 20 minutes of warning for ballistic missile launches. That's the difference between response and catastrophe. But here's the problem. Those systems exist because Denmark allows them. And they probably won't cancel the agreement is not a valid foundation for nuclear defense planning. Strategic planners require certainty. Certainty means sovereignty. Beyond missile defense, Greenland functions as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. Bombers based there can reach targets across the Arctic, Russia, and Europe faster than from mainland America. In any future high-intensity conflict, Greenland becomes the forward base for the entire northern theater. Right now, access depends on political goodwill. That's unacceptable at this level of risk. China isn't improvising. They're executing a long-term strategy. The Belt and Road Initiative isn't just roads and ports. It's influence architecture. The Arctic version is called the Polar Silk Road. Chinese investments already stretch across Iceland, Norway, Finland, and Russia's Arctic coast. They've bid on Greenlandic airports, mining projects, and infrastructure. This isn't coincidence. Once Chinese capital builds infrastructure, influence becomes permanent. Greenland is the missing piece. If China gains economic control there, the Arctic becomes a Chinese-friendly sphere before it fully opens. If America controls Greenland, the polar Silk Road collapses. This is why Greenland matters now. Delay favors China. Every year. This is where most people get stuck. They hear America buying Greenland, and their brain immediately jumps to one question. Okay, but how much would that cost? Hundreds of billions? 200 billion? More? And on the surface, that sounds outrageous. But that question completely misses the point. Because this isn't a purchase. It's an investment. And once you look at it that way, the math stops being controversial and starts being unavoidable. Let's break it down slowly. First, minerals. Greenland's known reserves of rare earths, uranium, copper, zinc, oil, and gas are conservatively valued at around $4.4 trillion at today's prices. But that number is misleadingly low. Why? Because rare earth demand is exploding. Electric vehicles, renewable energy, AI hardware, advanced weapons, all of them require massive quantities of these materials. And China controls most of the supply. As scarcity increases, prices don't double. They multiply. Defense analysts already expect rare earth prices to triple over the next few decades. That alone pushes Greenland's mineral value to $10 trillion or more. Second, Arctic shipping. As the Arctic opens, global trade routes don't just shift slightly. They realign. Control over Arctic ports, refueling hubs, search and rescue zones, and maritime services could generate tens of trillions in economic activity over the next 50 years. America wouldn't need to control all of it. Even capturing 10 to 15% through infrastructure, logistics, and regulation could mean $5 trillion in value. Third, military infrastructure. Right now, the U.S. spends enormous amounts maintaining overseas bases, negotiating access, rotating forces, and duplicating capabilities just to compensate for geographic limitations. Greenland solves that. Early warning radar. Arctic air bases. Submarine tracking. All in one place. Over 50 years, the savings from owning rather than renting strategic positioning easily exceed $2 trillion. And finally, strategic leverage. This is the hardest part to quantify, but arguably the most valuable. Breaking China's rare earth monopoly. Controlling access to Arctic trade. Reducing the risk of future wars. Avoiding trillions in emergency defense spending. Conservative estimates put that leverage at $5 trillion or more. Add it up. $10 trillion in minerals. $5 trillion in shipping. $2 trillion in defense savings. $5 trillion in strategic leverage. That's $22 trillion minimum. So even if America paid $200 billion, that's less than 1% of the return. This isn't expensive. This is the kind of deal empires are built on. This is the part nobody likes to say out loud. Denmark is not failing. Denmark is simply outmatched by reality. Greenland isn't valuable because it's culturally Danish. It's valuable because of what the 21st century demands. And Denmark cannot meet those demands. Let's be honest about why. First, capital. Developing Greenland properly would require hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure, ports, mines, roads, power grids, military installations, environmental mitigation. Denmark does not have the political or economic appetite for that scale of investment. Second, military power. Greenland is not just a development project. It's a strategic battlefield in waiting. Denmark cannot defend Greenland against pressure from China or Russia. They cannot enforce control over Arctic shipping routes. They cannot guarantee long-term security. That responsibility already falls on the United States. Third, political will. Every major development project in Greenland is stalled by environmental concerns, local resistance, or coalition politics in Copenhagen. Those debates are legitimate, but they are slow. Great power competition is not slow. China doesn't wait for consensus. Russia doesn't wait for environmental reviews. And finally, strategy. Denmark's long-term plan is stability. Minimal development. Gradual independence sometime in the future. That plan made sense in 1995. It does not make sense in 2025. The Arctic is opening now. Rare earth dependence is happening now. Strategic competition is happening now. Greenland cannot sit frozen in time while the world accelerates around it. And America knows this. This is where people imagine drama. They picture invasions, ultimatums, tanks. That's not how modern power works. This happens quietly. Legally. Economically. Phase 1 is pressure. Trade negotiations. Subtle shifts. Investment hesitation. Denmark starts paying a higher price to maintain the status quo than to resolve it. Phase 2 is Greenland itself. America doesn't talk about annexation. It talks about opportunity. Jobs. Infrastructure. Education. Healthcare. Ports. Airports. Energy projects. Real money, not symbolic aid. Greenlanders already want independence from Denmark. What they don't want is poverty or uncertainty. Offer independence plus prosperity, and the conversation changes. A referendum becomes inevitable. Not, do you want America? But, which future do you want? Denmark blocks it, and looks colonial. Denmark allows it, and loses control. Phase 3 is formalization. Denmark negotiates compensation. Greenland gets autonomy and investment. America gets strategic control. Everyone claims victory. Publicly, it's democracy and partnership. Privately, it's strategic necessity playing out exactly as expected. 5 years from now, Greenland may not be called a U.S. state. But American bases will expand. American companies will mine the resources. American policy will shape the Arctic. The label won't matter. The outcome will. Because when a superpower faces existential vulnerability, resource dependence, strategic exposure, future collapse, it doesn't debate forever. It removes the vulnerability. Greenland isn't about ambition. It's about survival. And survival always wins.